What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the midweek college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Mike Calabrese and Tanner McGrath. We have a lot to get to today, as always. We'll recap what we saw over the weekend, some good and some bad, and then we'll look ahead to Wednesday and Thursday. Gentlemen, we usually start with the good, but we're going to start off with the bad today. We're starting off with rants because I'm going to kick things off. I think I jinxed myself last week, Tanner. You were talking about your betting streak. I went on one of those streaks this weekend where everything was miserable. My 3-point variance was horrendous. Every team I bet against, except two, shot like 40 to 50% from three. My team shot like 28%, I think, combined. The only two that I didn't get 3-point variance against was Wake Forest and then Pitt. I had to fill it two and a half. Pitt hits a meaningless three at the bell to cost me money. And then Creighton. Villanova also couldn't make a three all day. But Creighton actually doesn't make threes. And the ref in that Villanova game decides you can call a timeout without having possession of the ball. I guess it's still football season. And then Stephen Ashworth throws up the single worst shot I've ever seen in my life, and it banks in from a corner to beat me there. And then to just an extra salt in the wound, I had Houston Christian last night, plus 7.5. They're up 11 at the half, up 8 with 8 to go. Nicholls State makes 18 straight free throws in the second half. And then I knew I was cooked down 4 when an 85% free throw shooter missed the front end of 101. I can't get a 90% free throw shooter to make a front end of a 101. So it was one of those weekends.
The melts
were unbelievable. So you're always going to have a streak like that during the season. You just have to roll with the punches on to the next day. But the Villanova game, after the Pitt game, into UCF was their two best players were taken out of each half due to foul trouble. Then I closed the night with Gonzaga. Can't throw it in the ocean. The worst end game. What is going on with Gonzaga? The worst end game execution I've ever seen. When I need a three at the end, obviously can't get it. Nicholls State. Houston Christian also wide open three at the end, or just didn't take the layup, and of course it clanks out. So yeah, it was one of those weekends. What are you gonna do? I did also, speaking of 3-point variance, I went to the Kentucky game, Kentucky-Arkansas, electric atmosphere. They weren't handing out bottles of beer. They were pouring them into cups per Coach Cal's request. I guess he thought people were going to throw bottles at him. I don't think that would have happened. But electric atmosphere. And then I watch Arkansas cannot miss from three. Probably one of the worst shooting teams in the country, which ruined that experience. So, it was not the most fun weekend for me. Other bads that I'll just throw out there before I get to you guys. Pitt, pathetic effort. Just a really pathetic effort against Virginia. I think that they don't deserve to be in the tournament as of right now. Now they have some road games that they could pick up quad 1 wins in, starting this weekend at North Carolina. I think that at SMU, probably gonna have to win those games. But they made 2025 Virginia look like 2019 Virginia for that entire game. Other bad, I'll say Iowa State was, you lose to Kansas State at home and then you get blown out by Kansas. They need that. And of course, last week on the podcast, that's my future that we lock in and then they lose 2 straight. They need Momcilovic back. Their offensive spacing right now is horrendous and it shows on the court. They're still obviously a top 10, 15 team. But they need him back. And I think ultimately, Hotspur's a good coach. I think these 2 games will probably be a good thing for them. But they need him back. He warmed up. I assume he'll be back in probably like a week or so. But you can tell his absence is felt for sure. Tanner, I'll go to you. Start with the bad. You got any rants or who do you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple ACC teams. The ACC is a joke. They should just make that a one big league this year. The story of the week, the bad
Yeah, but is
story
it
of the
going to
week.
happen again? The AC's a joke. They get 4 teams in, and they're all going to go to the
Yeah, they're all going
NBA,
to make
right?
the Final Four. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the team I wanted to go a few different ways here. Like, I mean, Colgate losing 4 in a row in the Patriot, that's one. But Florida State has lost 4 straight, including games to Cal, Stanford, and Virginia Tech. They went to 1-8 Boston College on Saturday. They led by 15 with 12 minutes left, melted the lead. Then they led by 4 with 14 seconds left, give up an offensive rebound, second chance bucket, and then turned the ball over on the inbounds, and the Eagles hit a deep three to end their losing streak. The Seminoles.
By the way, do you want to hear something else that how bad my weekend was? My round robin, I wrestled all morning over NC State or BC, and I chose NC State.
That's how it always
and
goes.
I'm sitting there watching BC, and I'm like, oh, who cares? They lost. And I watched them, the most miraculous comeback I've ever seen, and then a 3 at the bell to win it. I'm like, you have to be kidding me that I just missed out on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Seminoles they do nothing well. They're tall and they get to the line. They play in transition. They play through the post, but they're super inefficient at both. And now, Leonard Hamilton's now retiring at the end of the year because he's getting sued for not following up on NIL deals. I mean, just a real fall from grace for a team that made a couple of Elite Eights and a Sweet 16 in a 5-year span. It sucks they got their 2020 ripped away from them, but this is just an ugly team. Super unimpressed with that effort over the weekend and just really over the last few weeks. Just kind of a joke going on in Tallahassee. So that's my rant.
What has happened to Florida State athletics? Rough year for football and basketball. Yeah, Leonard Hamilton, this will be his last year. Florida State and Miami, man. Oof. It's been a rough year for both and the SEC as a whole. But I will forever remember. And yeah, you're right. Unless Florida State's causing a turnover, which they can do at times, unless they're forcing a turnover and getting out on the break for an open layup or dunk, their offense is lost.
I think their rim protection's okay too. I think they have a pretty high block rate, but it's just they don't. I hate how they run offense. It's like Hamilton doesn't run any stuff. I mean, it's probably good that he's getting out of there. It's just kind of ugly.
But I will always remember Hamilton for when I had Florida State plus 4.5 against Michigan, and in the NCAA tournament, and there was 28 seconds left, and Florida State just didn't foul, down 4, and then he had that memorable interview after the game where he says, "Foul? What do you mean? What do you mean? Why would we foul? The game was over." So we'll always remember and cherish that moment since I did have an FSU ticket. Calabrese, where do you want to go?
Yeah, speaking of Leonard Hamilton and not fouling, you would think that would automatically trigger some kind of point shaving investigation, which, by the way, everybody's getting investigated for point shaving now. Even my boys, Mississippi Valley State, they win against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and then they wake up the next day to find out that there's a NCAA cloud over top of them right now, potentially getting roped in to like 3 or 4 other schools on point shaving. It's like, listen, I'll testify in court. I'll give a deposition. I've watched them play. They're not that bad on defense on purpose. They just have nobody who's versatile. They can't box out. They can't do anything. Like they're not shaving points. It's ridiculous. Let's.
I don't know. They finally won. Maybe they woke up and decided that, hey, we might be under investigation. Let's not shave anymore. What if they're now a wagon?
I mean, if there's a wagon coming out of Ida Bena, Mississippi, I'll let everybody know. I think I may have to go off into the sunset. 2-0 on the season on swag bets. Just leave on top. In terms of my rants, what I'm frustrated by, all this 3-point talk, this is probably my biggest hot button when it comes to college basketball and coaching in particular. When you're 3-point dependent or you can fall in love with a 3 and they're not falling, do you have any other plans? Do you say anything to your team? I'm looking at you, Illinois. They couldn't throw it in the frickin' ocean against Nebraska, and they refused to change. They just doubled down. They took 42 threes against the Cornhuskers, 8 in overtime, and they only made 10 the entire game. So I'm frustrated. I thought that was the play against the Nebraska team that hadn't shown much life. Shout out to Stuck for sticking with them in that spot. Then they turn around against Ohio State. Same thing. First half, they can't make any threes. They're just firing them up. And by the way, they're barely 300th in 3-point accuracy from long range. So it's not like they're a team that shoots a lot and makes a lot. But they open 3 for 15 against the Buckeyes, and then they abandon it. And then what do you know? They score 51 points in the second half, 0 3-point attempts in the final 8 minutes. There's nothing worse than yelling at a team and then they learn their lesson, but the next game, not the game that you need them. So Brad Underwood, I'm pretty pissed at you. But maybe because we have Illinois futures on this pod, this is a change of heart from him down the stretch because they can shoot their way out of just about any team in the Big Ten. Like bottom dwellers can beat them if they shoot 20% from three, but they don't need to. It's just very frustrating to me when the adjustments aren't there, particularly when you're on the road. When you're in Lincoln and the threes aren't falling, it's totally reasonable to say, all right, let's run some stuff. Let's get some looks into the post. Let's try anything different. But he only learned that lesson by the second game.
I actually like the Illinois. I mean, it's I don't know. I think that they're safe from bottom feeders, even if they shoot a lot. They're just going to get so many offensive rebounds. Like they're going to be good from a shot volume perspective. But they got Ivisic back, and I think, and I like the starting lineup they had against Ohio State. KJ still has to like clean up some turnovers, and like he can be kind of pushed around a bit. But yeah, I would like to see them mix in some more offensive sets and just become a little bit more versatile on the offensive end. But they do have that offensive rebound. I mean, it's one of the best rebounding teams in the country. That offensive rebounding to fall back on. But I agree with you. They can fall in love with a three a bit too much. Let's move on to the good. The team you just mentioned, Nebraska, got to give them credit for potentially saving their season after a free fall. They beat Illinois in overtime in a game they never trailed, and they go out to Oregon and pick up the win, thanks in large part to Bryce Williams. That team goes as he goes. They also go as the other team's three-point shooting goes. That's kind of their defensive structure, and neither Illinois or Oregon were really hitting from the outside, which definitely helped. But Bryce Williams had a really good 2 games. Then I'll shout out Missouri. I don't think are enough people talking about Missouri. Kansas State. This is a team, I think they were just running a bit bad from three-point land, especially defensively. They have some talent, and they could have quit on the season, but they look like they're turning it around. I'm kind of interested in them against Kansas on Saturday in a decent spot. And then Texas Tech, what a win at Houston when, and you weren't even at full strength. That team is dangerous. They can beat you in a number of different ways. I'm super impressed with McCaslin, and they haven't even been like for most of the season. They haven't even been at full strength because they've had a couple injuries. Williams, Toppin was out. This team at full strength is very, very good and very scary.
Borderline top 10.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they are top 10. That's where I have them right now. Any thoughts, Tanner, on any of those?
Just wild to think Missouri almost made this segment for me. Just wild to think that they went 0-19 in SEC play last year. Just insane. I want to shine a light on 3 mid-major teams. First is that UAB beat North Texas last night to move to 8-2 in conference play. It's wild to think back in early November, the Blazers lost to Vermont on opening night, back when I thought my Cats were going to be a wagon. But they also, like in the non-con, they lost to Longwood, Illinois State, Middle Tennessee. They had that meltdown against Arkansas State. And then after all of that, it seems like they've kind of turned the ship around. Yaxel Lendenberg, he looks like the conference's best player again. He's just stuffing the stat sheet from every angle. And behind him, the Blazers just abuse the offensive glass. They don't turn the ball over. They have a huge shot volume margin in every single game. They did have that one blowout loss to Memphis in conference play, but that's it. They've been awesome otherwise. Second team, I'd like to apologize to all of the Bryant Bulldog fans out there, as I've been the biggest Bryant denier in the America East media world over the past few years. And I was right about them over the past few years, but I'm wrong this year. Too much size, too much athleticism. They abuse the offensive glass and block everything in sight. In conference play so far, the Bulldogs have a 35% offensive rebounding rate and a 20% block rate. They're 8-0 with basically all double-digit wins. Earl Timberlake's the best point forward in the low majors. Connor Withers is playing like a literal conference player of the year on both ends of the court. He's averaging 3 stocks per game while shooting 36% from 3. He's been awesome.
Intra-conference transfer.
Yeah, from Lowell. And what I really missed from that team was that Jared Grasso, who was their old coach, was just a terrible coach who held back a very unique group of talent year in and year out. And Phil Martelli Jr. is an awesome coach who has elevated this team. And I love the changes that he's made on the defensive side of the rock, just moving from passive zone scheme to an aggressive paint swarming one. And I forgot that he took over last year's team like a week before the season began because of Grasso's incompetence. And with the whole offseason to instill his culture, it's made all the difference. And Breeze, I know you want to touch on another Metro Atlantic team. Marist has played a cookie cutter schedule, probably I think literally the easiest in the nation, but they're 16-3. They're 9-1 in conference play in the MAC. There are 3 really good teams in that conference. The Foxes have already beaten Quinnipiac, and while Merrimack has the conference's best point guard, I'm going to give that to you, Breeze. Marist has the conference's best backcourt. I'm obsessed with Jaden Collins-Roberts, Elijah Lewis, and Josh Pasquarelli, who is awesome. They are a dominant drop coverage defense. Jackson Price is a good anchor, but Jaden Daughtry is like a swarming 4 that gives their scheme like a little bit more of a unique effectiveness. It reminds me of Cincinnati a little bit, actually. But conference opponents have shot 40% from 2-point range against them, and they lead the league in 3-point rate allowed. You can't score against them, and the backcourt keeps carrying them to wins. I really like this Marist squad.
Yeah, I mean, the MAC, to me, though, the MAC is... I mean, what offense do you try? I mean, I don't trust any offense in the MAC.
I guess Quinnipiac would the most of those 3.
Yeah. I mean, Quinnipiac is going to get offensive boards, and they're going to get to the line. They have like a more reliable, but they also can't really shoot.
I trust any team with a really good defense and a really good backcourt. And the reason why I like Merrimack is they have an awesome defense and they have the best, one of the best point guards in the low majors. I think that Merrimack's Marist guard play is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, but my point was going to be, it's funny because Quinnipiac, you mentioned those 3. Quinnipiac is like the polar opposite of how they want to play, pace wise. The problem, like when we eventually break down all these conference tournaments, is Marist and Merrimack. When do they play, by the way? What's that total? 1-17. Marist and Merrimack. They both are at risk of losing like 53-51 to, St. Peter's. That's like my fear is. I mean, you just look at Marist this year. I do believe in their defense, but like. Yes, they played an easy schedule. Yes, they only have 3 losses, but they lost to Ryder at home. They lost at Lehigh, and then they beat Army at home in overtime. They beat UMBC at home in overtime. They beat Niagara by 2 in overtime. They beat Siena by 5, St. Peter's by 5, Iona by 5, Stony Brook by 2, Mount St. Mary's by 3, New Hampshire by 5. Like they're going to be probably in a couple close games. And same with
swing the other way, sure.
Yeah, that's the only thing that for the 2 teams that are at the top of the league, that's a bit scary. And and then you have the Merrimack zone as well. Calabrese, is that where you want to go?
Yeah, so I was there on Sunday, the Ryder game. My friend Kyle was like, for $21, we can sit courtside. So shout out to Ryder, the Bronx team. Atmosphere, it was incredible. It's like a little bandbox of an arena, and they have it feels like a CYO basketball game. They have like the auditorium set up behind one of the baskets, but they have risers, so they have the band there. It was packed. It was a lot of fun. Bud Clark's entire family was 2 rows behind us, so they were making a ruckus as he basically led them down the stretch and then hits the game winner, which was amazing. And also shout out to Ryder. I was convinced that they would have nothing in terms of concessions, but they actually had a little hot dog cart with like microbreweries and seltzers, and so I had everything I wanted. For $35 I was able to have a great time courtside and saw an amazing game. But everything you guys have been saying about the Warriors is true. Joe Gallo's no 3 zone defense, which for people that don't watch a ton of zone defenses in college basketball, some are designed to force other teams to shoot over them, and this one is designed essentially to not even give up attempts from 3-point range. They give up fewer than 7 triples per game. So we talk about this a lot, Stuck. You want a great backcourt, leader. You want someone who can run the point and be a March Madness darling, and a defense that gives, a top 4 seed some issues in terms of how they prepare. I want to see Merrimack in the field of 68. We'll see if that's going to happen, because I agree, there's plenty of potential landmines in the MAC tournament. This is clearly a one-bid league, so you can't have a bad night and lose 58, 57, and that's clearly on the table for them. But if they do make it, this is a team I would circle on the 14 or 15 line to really give a top seed some issues.
Well, they're also going to slow the game down. You want them to play a team that has turnover issues. Like if as a top team that doesn't have like a plethora of ball handlers, because they're going to get destroyed on the glass by a high major team, most high major teams. But yeah, I want the unique schemes in the dance. I am curious to watch Merrimack, and plus you're not used to seeing. It's one of the reasons we saw like Baylor made runs with their zone. Syracuse every year, no matter how good or bad they are, they would sneak into the tournament and they would make a run because it's hard to prepare for a unique defense, and then teams aren't used to seeing that zone. And Merrimack's kind of the new Syracuse. I guess South Alabama's up there too. South Alabama plays crazy amount of zone, them and Merrimack.
South Alabama also plays the zone that forces other people to beat them over the top, and no one has been able to do it. They just pack it in.
Yeah. They're I think the last couple games they paid for it. Now, what's really interesting is if you look, I missed out on a couple prime betting opportunities because I bet Troy the second time around right after they saw the South Alabama zone, and then they played Louisiana Monroe. They lost that game. They played Louisiana Monroe again in a back-to-back, and they lost again. Just being able to see that zone. And South Alabama kind of has to do that out of necessity in a way because they just have no size. And they play in a league where there's not a ton of great three-point shooting. But I'm curious to watch with Merrimack, just in conference play, on the second meetings against teams. Do they fare better? I think they've only played one team twice. It's someone bad, Fairfield maybe. So and they won that game convincingly. But does the familiarity factor help the second time around? Something that I'm looking at. But yeah, that's cool. You got I saw the video you tweeted out that when you got to see the game winner. But yeah,
they played Fairfield twice. They beat them at home by 13 and then beat them on the road by 21. For what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean much of anything.
Yeah, Fairfield stinks. But yeah, just something to keep in mind because they're new to the league, right? And teams aren't used to seeing them. But
I'll just throw this out quick. If there's plenty of dysfunctional programs in the Northeast, Joe Gallo's got to get a much better job. I would imagine this is going to be his last year with Merrimack. Like, where would you like to see him, Tanner? Is Seton Hall too much of a jump? Like, they're obviously not having a good year. I don't know if they're going to pull the ripcord this quickly, but there's some programs at the mid-major, high major level that maybe you get into a bottom team in that conference. But I think he would be a phenomenal hire based on what he's been able to squeeze out of Merrimack, which is he's turned them into a really dangerous low major team with almost no resources. So to be able to do that and to come from I believe they're at the Division II ranks, to be a part of that transition as well. Not only has he made them a difficult out, but also he took them to very, deep runs in the Division II tournaments before they made that transition. So what are your thoughts there?
I think it's a pretty tough jump to come. Well, because also he's not just coming from the Metro Atlantic, he's coming from the NEC. And that's a really big jump to go even to the Big East. I mean, Holloway did it from the MAC, and now he's kind of flailing. I never really entirely loved that hire. So the question is, how high of a level could you go? I mean, could he maybe get a job in the American, which has had a ton of coaching turnover in the last few years and is always kind of iffy? I don't see him going power conference level. I mean, what does he want to stay?
If you go power conference level, I think there is, I think some of these power conference teams that are at such a disadvantage NIL wise that are going to start to fall behind. They have if I'm them, you have to almost service academy, Army, Navy, Air Force it and compete with a unique scheme. That's really probably your only chance as you fall behind. Like take Seton Hall, right? Like Seton Hall doesn't have the money to really compete on a night in and night out basis, and they're probably going to keep falling behind. So there's like certain programs out there like that that just don't have the money. Where I think more innovative, unique schemes could potentially work, where you're just not going to be able to compete on talent.
Hey Breeze, what if Joe Gallo is the Leonard Hamilton replacement?
I think that would be a pretty big jump. I mean, FSU has apparently, according to legal documents, has some NIL issues. So, maybe he can do it give him a discount, do it on the cheap.
All right. The stage is set for Super Bowl 59 and the many prop bets to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time pick alerts from our experts like Super Bowl prop masters Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon, plus all the tools you need to turn a profit betting in 2025. Right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB for Super Bowl. That's actionnetwork.com/SB. That's $40 off for the full year. So you'll be covered for the Super Bowl, March Madness, baseball, NBA, and even next college football and NFL season. So don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off Action Pro. Okay, quick ad read, but don't fast forward this one. This is actually a useful ad read. So don't hit your fast forward. This is one that all bettors can use because I use this myself. I'm referring to Edge Boost. So if you're listening to the show, you probably like betting as much as I do. And when it comes to betting, there are two things I'm always trying to do: make it easier and make it more profitable. That's why I partnered with Edge Boost, the financial platform that pays you cash back to wager. Edge Boost is an online bank account that pays you for every deposit because with the Edge Boost Visa debit card, you get up to 0.5% cash back on all your sportsbook, daily fantasy site, and casino transactions. That's free money back in your pocket just for doing what you're already doing. It's a no-brainer. This isn't some credit card gimmick, I promise. I opened my own Edge Boost debit card account, made it even easier to deposit into all of my sportsbook accounts. I mean, just one click and it went right in. They have relationships with all the sportsbooks. No hassle, no catch, no hidden fees, literally zero fees. They make money on volume and you're getting money back as well. There's no minimum balance requirements, none of that. And if you ever had a casino transaction flagged by your bank because they thought it was suspicious or been given the runaround when trying to fund a sportsbook account online, as most of us have, the Edge Boost debit card is the perfect tool to solve all of those issues. It starts with a $250,000 daily limit and will never be declined for gambling activity. It's why I was happy to open an account. It's also FDIC insured, if you're wondering. So make your betting life easier and stop leaving money on the table. Visit edgeboost.bet to learn more. That's edgeboost.bet. And use the promo code BBOC to start at Tier 2 for faster bank deposits and even more cash back. That's edgeboost.bet, promo code BBOC. All right, let's get to some midweek looks. I think that from a spot perspective tomorrow, let's see if there's a line out here yet. We're recording this like 4 Eastern. Lines start to trickle in right about now. From a spot perspective, does it get any better than Providence tomorrow against Creighton? Providence seems to have they've like found like the rotations and kind of roles recently. They've dealt with injuries, and you're getting Creighton off that ridiculous Villanova win. They have Marquette and UConn at home on deck. Now they're going up to Providence, a team they already blew out. From a spot perspective, as good as it gets. I still don't really believe in this Creighton team. Kalkbrenner is great, yes. But some of their bigs have shot over their head. I think Providence can win this game.
The problem is Providence is so over-reliant on the catch and shoot threes, and you can't get that against the Cal crop.
That's true.
I was so close to pressing that button, and I just don't see. And is Hopkins he's out for the year?
I assume he's done for the year. Yeah.
And without him, there's like no reprieve because they have no interior creation. You got to create in the mid range against Creighton. So
yeah, and Providence is good in the mid range percentage wise, but They don't really shoot them ever.
Yeah. If they don't
You're kind
create
of forced,
those,
you're kind of
those
forced
attacking
to against
picks.
Creighton. I don't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you got?
Unfortunately, I'm in a tough spot because I was looking at East Carolina hosts Rice. It just opened 6.5 though. East Carolina -6.5, which is a little bit higher than I wanted. I was looking for maybe -5 or under. If it trickles down overnight, maybe. But I think it's an okay spot. I mean, ECU has been playing a lot better lately after a tough midseason swoon. They played Memphis and North Texas tough before winning 3 straight, and now they're in a decent bounce back spot, returning home after a tough overtime loss to Temple. A little bit more interesting of a spot for Rice. On one hand, they've lost 7 straight, including 3 by 1 possession, and they really should have beaten Memphis last Sunday. I think Memphis shot 60% from 3, and they won by 3. But is Rice like fired up after that loss, or are they deflated after a 40-minute grinder where they outplayed the class of the league and still came up short for the 7th straight time? Schematically, I like the matchup a lot for ECU. Pirates are a team I was pretty high on in the preseason. I thought they had kind of an outside shot of competing in the American title race. I think their defense is super underrated. I think they're a great defensive squad that's been bitten by tough 3-point variance. I mean, conference opponents are shooting over 40% from 3, and that's despite them being a very effective 3-point denial defense. They lead the American 3-point rate allowed. I think Woodard and Riley are good wing defenders. And that's important against a Rice team that really lives beyond the arc and in the mid-range while generating almost nothing at the rim. Also, I don't know if Kellen Amos is healthy. He missed a game recently, has barely played since. I think he's played 20 minutes in his last 2 games, and he's a really important offensive piece for them. And East Carolina can mix in some zone. They mix in a lot of zone, and Rice, dreadful zone offense. Now, the worry there is that Rice smashes the offensive glass against an extended zone because the Owls, they live by just chucking and crashing the glass. But ECU has been a really good two-way rebounding team in conference play. They actually lead the American in second chance points per game and second chance points per game allowed. And a good data point for this matchup, both played FAU to a near draw. Rice did it on the road while ECU did it at home, but Rice did it by shooting 13 for 25 from 3, while ECU did it by grabbing 25 offensive rebounds. I expect more of that. And finally, like the Pirates still have RJ Felton, who I think is a dog. He's one of my favorite guards at that level. In the half court, the Owls will isolation funnel a lot, which is what Felton, Riley, and CJ Walker want to do. And the Pirates,
they're sneaky talented on offense. They just can't shoot. But
that's why I kind of bought them, because I was like, they're good on defense. They have good guard play. But you're right, their half court offense it's flawed. But they could live in transition here against the worst transition defense in the American. Rice cannot get back and defend in transition. And they also can be a bit shaky in their ball handling, which will allow Riley and Felton, who combine for 3 steals per game, nearly 4 steals per game, to get those easy buckets, speed the Owls up. And, I mean, the one worry here is that Rice is able to mismatch Hunt in isolation, exploit a weaker ECU isolation defense. But if I can get a slightly lower number, I quite like that matchup.
Yeah. Calabrese, what do you got?
So you mentioned Stuck. Was this the spot of spots? Could I interest you guys in fading Arkansas coming off of their Super Bowl win over the Wildcats? Great for Coach Cal. I'm sure he's still basking in that victory, but let's look at what they've done. They're going on the road here to the 40 acres to play Texas. Their last 3 conference road games before winning in Lexington, lost by 24 to Tennessee, lost by 4 to LSU, lost by 18 to Mizzou. They didn't cover in any of those. Now, defensively, they're rounding into solid shape. They're nearly top 30 in KenPom, but it's hard to win with any consistency when you struggle in 3 key areas. They're not a great three-point shooting team. I understand they just shot over 50% from 3, so I want to fade in this spot to see them fall back to earth. They don't get to the line very much. They're 228th in foul shot rate nationally, and they just get 8 offensive rips per game. So I don't know. I look at this. Kentucky also left 9 points from the foul line on the table. I think they shot 9 for 18. I'm not saying that
Arkansas had higher 3-point percentage than Kentucky did at the line. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's absolutely wild. And also it bears mentioning Boogie Flan, done for the year now with his thumb injury. He was someone that could get them 20 points in a given night or get them 10 assists. That's a lot of playmaking and productivity to lose from a lineup that wasn't exactly humming before that Kentucky win. And now here comes Texas at home. They're 9-4 against the spread on their home floor. I trust them to be way more consistent because they have a super low turnover rate. They're a very strong shooting team across the board. Their weakness is on the glass, but it doesn't matter as much against Arkansas. So I just see this as, when you don't want to play the comparison game all that much, but the teams I mentioned, Tennessee, LSU, Mizzou, they all handled Arkansas on their home floor. You look at what Texas did against those teams. They lost to Tennessee, but they covered. They drilled LSU by 31. They beat Mizzou by 8 and covered. And Trey Johnson, at least I think, is pulled out of his mini midseason slump. He's a capable leader as an offensive engine for the Longhorns. He gave 26 to Tennessee, he gave 30 to A&M, and he was efficient in their recent blowout win over LSU. So the fact that it's popped in the market at 7.5, I'd play this up to 9. I think Texas is going to be able to handle Arkansas. I think there's going to be a hangover effect for the Hogs.
Hogs are also awful on the road. Awful on the road. And before that Kentucky win, I think they're 1-6 against the spread on the road.
Yeah, definitely an emotional. I mean, that was as emotional of a game as you're going to get. Probably took a lot out of them. Are we not talking about Texas enough? Like, this is a team that seems to be rounding into form. Like, they've won 3 of 4. They beat Missouri, Texas A&M. They destroyed LSU in what I thought was a tricky spot. And then their one loss over that stretch was in a coin flip game at Ole Miss. It was a team that had a lot of new pieces that they put together, and the Trey Johnson seems to only be getting better, but it seems like everyone, Kaluma, Larry, Mark, all these pieces that they kind of assembled are starting to find their roles. And I don't know, this Texas team, I'm not a huge Rodney Terry guy, but they could be dangerous.
I love their defense. I love their defense. I think their defense is awesome from Shedrick up. But I'm not a big Terry fan because I don't like how he runs offense, and I think this Texas team has some offensive continuity issues. But they're so good defensively. They're 13th in defensive efficiency since mid-January.
Yeah, but I've liked a little. I mean, a lot of it is just Johnson is so good. But definitely a team that I keep my eye on that I don't think is. It's easy to get lost in the SEC because you have Alabama and Auburn at the top, which is why Missouri should be being talked about more. I mean, Texas A&M is slowly putting together like an elite resume. Like, if Texas A&M keeps winning, like, they could be like a 2 seed. And like, they have Tennessee at like their next 5. They're at Missouri. If they win that game, then they're home against Georgia, home against Arkansas. You got Tennessee at home, Vandy at home. They have a really tough stretch at the end at Florida, home against Auburn, and then close at LSU. But if they keep winning, I mean, this team has as many, I think, quad 1 and quad 2 wins as anybody. They have a semi-away win at Purdue. They beat, who else? They beat Creighton on a neutral, Texas Tech on a neutral. Team is quietly putting together a really good resume, and especially they're 17-5. You got to remember that they lost to Alabama by 6 when they missed 20 free throws and Wade Taylor didn't play. And then they lost to Kentucky when Wade Taylor didn't play. So, one of their best players was out for 2 of their losses. And then, against Alabama, they probably still wouldn't have won, but they did go 28 of 48 from the line, which is pretty hard to do. And they were down like 15, I think, with like 8 to go. But
yeah, the Aggies are 12-5 in quad 1 and 2, which is the 3rd best record behind Auburn and Alabama.
Yep. So, and if A&M gets 7 for 10 from 3 from Wade Taylor, like they did on Saturday night, they're unstoppable. Now, you're going to get that once every 3 or 4 games, if you're lucky. But if they're making their threes, then good luck. Another one I'll throw out. I tried it on Saturday and failed, although I'd make the bet again. I faded St. Mary's. I think I betted a pick. It closed 2.5. I was fine with the bet. Gonzaga just went 3 of 17 from 3. They also had 2 85% free throw shooters, missed 6 free throws. Some killer free throws down the stretch. Am I fading St. Mary's again? They go to San Francisco. I think I might. I
think that's a good spot, Stuck.
I love that
San
spot.
Francisco is, it's as good a spot as you're going to get. San Francisco at home has been an absolute wagon this year. And I know that Malik Thomas didn't play against Washington State, but in some aspects they might be better without him, especially defensively. It also forces more minutes for Beasley, who I like. The problem is they can't defend at the rim, which is concerning against St. Mary's. But look at some of these results for San Francisco, because San Francisco lost earlier this year to St. Mary's by 20, like 2 weeks ago. And then St. Mary's gets a huge win over Gonzaga. They basically lock up the West Coast Conference. Like now you're hitting the road for San Francisco looking for revenge. It's a great spot. But San Francisco lost by 23 at Santa Clara. At home, they beat them by 3. They lost by 9 at Washington State. At home, they beat them by 24. What's another one? I think that's the only teams they lost to. And then here you have St. Mary's. They lost by 20 on the road. I think they have a good shot to win this game. St. Mary's is good, but this is like the peak of their market value. I'm still not all the way sold on their offense if they're not just getting every offensive rebound. I get their defense is good, but teams are shooting 28% from 3 in conference play. Last year their defense was even better, and that number was like 32%, which is where it probably should be, and in league play too. And right now it's at 28%. We just saw Gonzaga go 3 of 17 from 3. So San Francisco has some shot makers. I think it's a great spot for the Dons. You were nodding your head, Tanner.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just trying to figure out how they score. I mean, because they shoot a lot. It's tough to get threes off. They have a good pick and pop pig, don't they? What's his name?
Who, San Francisco?
Yeah.
Who San Francisco misses is Lingard can he can pop out, but
that's a good way to beat Marys.
They miss Newberry defensively.
Yeah.
But
I wrote it down because I think it's an awesome spot, one of the best spots of the week. But I how do you score on Marys? I don't understand how you score on them.
Their defense is legit. But here's the other thing. St. Mary's, the other spot to fade them, there's 2 this week. And especially if they win that game, at Oregon State. I'm curious to see if San Francisco, who doesn't play zone, do they mix in zone? You can press. I don't know why Gonzaga didn't press Marys. I thought they were going to press them more, like we saw that last year. And Gonzaga actually has been pressing a little bit more. But Gonzaga threw the zone out in the second half, and Mary's offense is lost. They can't run any of their stuff. What are they going to see against Oregon State? You're going to see pressure in zone. That is the good thing, is that I think their offense will be stifled in that game. But what else? What do you got, Tanner? Anything else?
Yeah, little Am East tidbit from me, as you're always going to get on this podcast. I have been betting a ton of Maine Black Bear unders recently because their defense is unreal, but their offense has been and likely still is overvalued thanks to crazy hot 3-point shooting. But the unders, they've been hitting lately because Maine has shot a much more reasonable 38% from 3 over the past 5 games, and 4 of those went under. And that includes their game at NJIT a few weeks ago. They host NJIT on Thursday. That game finished with 101 total points on 61 possessions after the total closed 131. It was an education day early afternoon tip, so that's worth mentioning. But the key matchup here is 2 guard-friendly, dribble-heavy ball screen offenses facing off against 2 excellent ball screen coverage units. I don't need to explain myself about Maine. Most of you who have listened to me or read me before know that Maine is a swarming perimeter ball screen coverage defense behind the best defensive backcourt in the league, Kellen Tynes and Jaden Clayton. But NJIT has been surprisingly good in ball screen coverage, especially on the perimeter, where Tariq Francis and Sebastian Robinson have taken massive steps forward as point of attack defenders. As a result, these 2 teams rank 1st and 2nd in the America East in pick and roll points per game allowed. And the first game saw the 2 combine for 32 points on 48 ball screens. That's 0.67 points per possession. Also, Maine's going to throw in there Chris Markwood's patented aggressive pressing 2-3 zone. And NJIT is among the worst zone offenses in the nation, an offense built around Robinson Francis in isolation and ball screen sets, with no playmaking forwards is not good against zone. And they are the literal worst press offense in the nation, 0.6 points per possession. Finally, the pace will be plodding. Neither team really gets out in transition much. Maine forces opponents into these long, methodical half-court sets, while NGIT takes forever to do anything on offense. So we'll regularly see 30-second Highlander possessions that end in a bricked mid-range jump shot. And Maine, again, is still due for negative shooting regression from beyond the arc. I still don't think they're a 38% three-point shooting team against an NGIT team that ranks top 25 nationally in low-quality threes forced per shot quality. So, and as you know, as I consistently say about the Maine Black Bears, and as I'll keep saying as we get into March, when the three-point shots aren't falling, those interior ball screen lanes start to clog up, and then the offense just turns into Kellentines dribbling into crowded lanes for 20 seconds and pulling up from two. That's what happened in their 49-point effort at Vermont last Saturday. So unless Maine forces 100 turnovers and scores 25 fast break points, this is going to be a total rock fight, just like it was in the first matchup. I would bet like under 115, honestly. I think we're seeing another 100-point effort here.
By the way, something just clicked in my head while you're talking about that. Not America East-wise, but got to shout out, I forgot in the good, New Mexico. Their defense, you were talking about defense, their defense is really rounding into form. Dent is amazing. Really impressive win. As far as, especially when you consider the margin at Utah State, to kind of stamp themselves as the class of the league, at least as of this moment.
Good defense and guard play.
What do you got? Yep.
I got two low major looks. Fairleigh Dickinson back on my card, catching over 10 points against Central Connecticut State. The Knights are 12-2 against the spread on the road, one of the best road warrior teams in the entire country. They covered as big road dogs at Creighton, Nebraska, Boston College. Now, yes, they lost by 11 at home to the same Blue Devils team, but the huge caveat there is Terrence Brown didn't play. If you look at the players in the entire country that average over 20 points and have 6 rebounds per game, it's Dawson Garcia, it's Ace Bailey, it's Cooper Flagg, it's Max Reynaud, and Brown. That's it. End of the list. So in terms of a guy being irreplaceable, Brown is that. He is back now. And Central Connecticut State, I'm not going to say that they don't deserve to be, the class of this conference, but they've been crushing awful teams lately. They've won and covered 5 in a row. I think that's what's inflating this number. Hopefully we get closer to 12. But the average ranking of the teams that they beat in this 5-game stretch, 329th by KenPom, and that includes the win over FDU without Brown. They're below average from the line in terms of the Blue Devils. They barely shoot 70% there. They're flat out bad from 3-point range, but they never give away free points. They never foul. They never give away free points. First in free throw attempts and made 3 throws per game, surrendered. But I just trust in FDU, in terms of playing on the road. They've already been good on the road. And if you want to look at KenPom, non-existent home court advantages, that's Central Connecticut State, 361st out of 364 eligible teams. And then the last one here, over. Tanner gave you, a plodding rock fight under. This will be the palate cleanser. I'd go over all the way up to 155.5 between St. Thomas and South Dakota State. Over has cashed in 70% of the Tommies games this year. They are the offensive class in the Summit, at least in my opinion, because of their elite guard play. They have 4 guards who average over 11 points per game. In their first meeting, the total had, they were flirting with it in the first half, nearly 80 points in the first half. But because it was close, a 1-point victory for the Tommies, there wasn't those foul shots, those extra points in the last 90 seconds. Everything really slowed down. It ends at 145. I'm hoping that pulls this total closer to 150. Now, the other element of it is I think the strengths of both teams are going to shine through. South Dakota State is going to kill them on the line. Oscar Clough finished with 13 and 19 against them the last time that they played. The Tommies struggle in terms of their interior defense and keeping teams off the offensive glass. And then when you look at the 3-point rate, the first time they played, these two teams fired up 56 triples. So I feel confident that St. Thomas is going to continue to fire away from 3. And you can just do that against South Dakota State. That you're going to have an opportunity to fire them up, and hopefully the 3-point variance goes in our favor. I think this game is going to be played closer to the 80s than the 70s. So like I said, play it up to 155.5. Let's hope that we get a better number, a little bit closer to 150.
All right, good stuff. That'll do it for us. We have the Super Bowl. We'll have an episode later in the week, but pretty much from here on out, it's nothing but hoops. March will be here before we know it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Tanner and Mike for joining me. Thanks to our producer, David, on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Leave a 5-star review. Those really help us out. Myself, Mike, and Greg Waddell will be back on Thursday with a look at the weekend. Tanner will have his weekly America East segment as well. Thanks again for tuning in. Enjoy the hoops. Good luck on all of your wagers and the melts. We'll catch y'all later. Cheers.